Well, hello, and welcome to the Situtory. You'll see I am back in my Situtory because it's not actually raining today. Hi, Daddy. If you haven't been here before, my name is Jane, and I'm a textile artist based in the middle of Scotland, very near to Loch Lomond, and I run the Studio Club, which is a creative membership. And today, what I thought I'd do was give you a tour of the garden, but also talk about how I am planning to use the garden as much more of a part of my income this year. And I thought it would be really interesting to people who are interested in gardens and businesses and seeing behind the kind of show of the website, but also to people who are maybe thinking of doing a kind of similar thing and are looking at their space and their land and thinking, I would really love to have a business that allowed me to garden. I'll be going over some of the things that I have been thinking about this year. Now, this isn't new to me. I've talked before about why we moved here and how I had a cut flower business at that point, and so on. But I thought it'd be interesting just to go back over it. So this is, I've looked out the details that we got when we bought the house in 2003. Now this is the house. This hedge here, that's kind of like knee height and things, is now you can't see the house at all. But I'm really tired today because my Yorkshire Terrier, Teasel, got out of sort of like the fence that now is sort of in this, but this is now my bedroom here, what used to be a garage. And we have a fence that keeps the dogs in this little bit of garden, which is really just grass and box balls and a big birch tree. And it means that we can have the French windows open at night and they can come and go. But Teasel got out of that bit and into the hedge here, where he found a hedgehog. And he didn't actually touch the hedgehog, but he became this rabid beast of barkiness and snappiness. And when we went to try and get him out, there was no way that we could fight through this hedge, which is now like this thick and 8 foot tall. So we had to get a broom and kind of drive him out of it. It was 3 in the morning and I am still to recover from it. And so is Teasel, because he has very literally been dragged through a hedge backwards. But the hedgehog is fine, which is the main thing. So anyway, this was our house when we moved here. But what's probably more important with this was the garden. This is the garden that is not that dissimilar now. It's the lawn, and I'll show you that. And we've now got some fruit trees planted in the lawn, but it's still a lawn. But then this bit, which is on here as a field, this is the bit that I completely changed into being a flower farm. And at that time, I had an existing flower business. I'd been doing it for 2 years. I had left my job as an art gallery curator and I had retrained in horticulture, and about halfway through the horticulture qualification, I realised that there was nobody in Scotland at that time growing cut flowers, and that it would be something that I could start off in my then very, very small garden and just see how it goes. I had a 2-year-old and I was pregnant with my younger daughter, and it just seemed to be a really nice thing that I could fit in around them. And then it grew, and it grew, and it grew, as these things tend to. And I started growing my flowers on a farmer friend's land, and I did farmers markets, and I did weddings, and I did events. And by the time we moved here, I had a bit of a customer base. So I spent the next year turning all of that field into cultivated beds. They weren't really raised beds like raised beds, but got them ploughed, put down lots of sheep wool on it, cardboard, rock dust, anything that we could get, and I grew flowers there. And I started to sell from the gate here, and I also used to send bouquets out all over the country. And then after about 5 years of doing that, I began to get more and more tired. And I would find myself, having picked the flowers for, say, Saturday market, just so tired that I was weeping, sitting often in the rain, surrounded by buckets, which is not good because you don't want to get rain on your buckets, just weeping and unable to physically pull the trolley with the buckets full of flowers back under cover. And eventually it was discovered that I have an autoimmune disease, that I had been running on fumes with no steroids. And even after sort of all of the treatment and learning how to live with things, it was clear that my stamina had just gone. And I gave up the flower business. I did the weddings that I had sort of contracted to do, and then 12 years ago, I completely shut down that business, and I turned to just doing craft business, and that carried on for another 10, 12 years. And I had got myself into such a state that I couldn't garden. I mean, I had lost something that I loved so much that I really just couldn't garden. And the whole of the area that I'm going to show you just went to rack and ruin, and I gave away a lot of plants to friends and to other flower growers. I rehoused some into a bit of rough meadow. I lost a lot because I wasn't looking after them, and every time I looked there it was just awful. And then one weekend in early spring, I went away with my friends Vanessa and Rebecca, and we went for kind of like a few days down in the Peak District. Very nice. And while I was away, my husband rented a digger and a dumper, and he ordered lots of topsoil and lots of wood, and he turned it into raised beds because that would be much easier for me to keep. And he made me a vegetable garden, and it was just wonderful. So this got me back into growing, and I was growing our vegetables, and if we had surplus, then it could go out to the community and all this kind of thing, and I loved it. But then, bit by bit, I started to want to grow flowers again, because I just love their beauty. I love growing things from seed. I love having a flower garden. So all of last year, while I was using personally plants from the garden in my art, I was using them to eco-print, I was using them to do monoprint, all kinds of things that I was taking inspiration from in the garden. This little bit in my head went, I wonder how we could actually bring that into the business. And that is what I'm doing this year. So, what am I going to do? What are my great plans for this really, really small piece of land? Well, first of all, I should say that the most difficult thing of any small business, but particularly a small business where you are making things. It's not the making things. It's not the growing things. It's not the seed selection or the digging your beds or the planting things up or battling slugs or any of those things. The most difficult thing and the most important thing is that you need to have an audience. You need to have a customer base of people who actually want what you're growing. You need to be really honest with yourself about that. There's no point in just growing 6,000 sweet peas and then looking around and going, oh, who would like to buy my sweet peas, which are, ready now, and finding people have sweet peas themselves, or they've gone on holiday, or they didn't ever want any sweet peas, or whatever. You have to, if you're going to make a financial success of it, have your audience. And I'm lucky in that I do have an existing business and an audience. I have people that I teach, that I share my ideas with, who I lead in courses that are using plants. The Studio Club, it has this kind of tagline, I suppose, and it is about rekindling your creativity, because I think everybody has creativity and it just needs to be rekindled sometimes, and reconnecting to nature, because again, I think that's something that a lot of us have lost. So I already had this group of people who I know are interested in plants. And it's very, very important to me that the main thrust of that business is getting as many people becoming creative again and reconnecting to nature as possible. And that's why it's at a very low price, and that's why there are supported places available. But I have become really aware that most people are not in my situation. They can't just wander outside their door and pick things that they're going to use in crafts. They can't just necessarily find wildflowers. And if they do have a garden, they may not want to pick it all to create with it. Some people do. Some people do. And that the fact that it's come from their garden is really important to them. But other people want to try things like cyanotypes or eco-printing or monoprinting. And they don't have the materials. And yes, they could go on to Amazon and buy, packs of 50 pressed flowers from China. But it's not quite the same, and they're not picked for sort of flow and that kind of thing. So I thought, well, here, just as I had thought, oh, nobody's growing cut flowers back in 2000, I thought, nobody's really preserving garden things for people to use. Not in any consistent way. There are some people who are doing like plant dye things, though not nearly enough. That's why I'm going to be doing some of that. There are some people beginning to do the kind of like pressed eco-printing things. It's very much just pressed flower kind of heads, which are beautiful. Again, not enough people for the demand, but there is this big gap in the market. So that is the gap that I'm heading for. And it's going to be really interesting, because it's obviously a gap in the market that is just going to be, for me, a UK market, because I cannot send out all of these things very easily elsewhere because they are plant material. So really heavy regulations around exporting anything. But I'm hoping that there are going to be lots more people in lots more countries who do this kind of small scale thing, very much in the way that cut flower growing. When I started in 2000, there really weren't many people at all. Sarah Raven had a florist business for a while, and she grew some of her flowers, and that's how she started all of the empire at Perch Hill. And there were the remnants of like big commercial flower growers. So daffodils and roses and sweet peas were still grown in Scotland. Now daffodils still are grown in Scotland, Grampian. But there was nothing like the amazing plethora of growers that there is now. So I hope that this is going to be kind of the start, renaissance, that when people want to do eco-printing or cyanotypes or monoprinting or anything that involves actual plant material, they'll be able to get it from a local grower. It'll be so much nicer. So anyway, that's enough of me talking, and let's go round the garden. Right, stepping off the situatory, this is the bit that was lawn in those pictures, and you can see that we've put a kind of an eating area and an outdoor kitchen there. But otherwise it's pretty much the same, and we replaced the leander trees with that hedge. But it is where this bed start that the field was. And if you look through the arch, this arch was planted as maiden sticks. It's a home beam in 2004. Look at it now. Anyway, you might be able to see that there is a gate right at the end of that path. And that was the original gate into the field. But it used to be at this front arch, or where the front arch is. And it was just like a metal fence. So, this is my productive garden. I keep calling it a dye garden. I'm not really sure what it is that I want to call it, because it's not just dye plants now. Some of them are going to be eco-printing plants, and a lot of them, I think, I'm going to be looking for the best plant for things like cyanotypes and monoprinting, and selling collections of those as well. So, I don't know, the artist's garden maybe. That sounds a little bit pretentious. So, at the front here, we have a couple of courgettes, and then all of these dahlias. Now these are the dahlias that I grew from the floret seeds that Erin at Floret Flowers sent me. And my job, after I've done this film, is to hoe this bed, because you can see it's beginning to get all weedy. And with something like the dahlias, I prefer not to have an understory of weeds with them, because it just gets really difficult when I'm going to be lifting them. And then in the second kind of bed, originally we had these two beds next to each other because we were going to build big cloche frames, but we're probably not going to do that now. So they're actually just very difficult beds to think. Got some agastache, which was meant to be not hardy, but is now taking over the world, which is one of my favourite teas. So it gets to stay, and I just chop it up and have it in tea all the time. So we'll come in from the messy side. A soft toy cat left by the dogs. And here we have a bed of Rabenza cosmos, and this is just such a beautiful, beautiful plant. And it is quite funny, because at the moment I look at Liz Spencer, who is the Dogwood Dyer's pictures of her garden, and her cosmos are all about 6 foot high, and she can't keep up with the picking. Mine are maybe a foot, and I can definitely keep up with the picking. Now, I'll squidge past. You can see here that I do allow self-seeders. These are nasturtiums, beautiful, I think a dark nasturtium from last year. And we also have a potato has volunteered there, I think. Right, so hop past the barrow. So this is a bed of scabious, black knight scabious. They are just a brilliant eco print plant, also a dye plant. More cosmos tucked in places, and then the sunflower, which is hoppy sunflower. Now I've had some blight on these sunflowers, so I am rather skeptical about whether I will get a crop. I think the blight came on the seeds, unfortunately, because we haven't grown them in this particular area before, and it's not a big disaster if they don't flower. But you can see that I've cut back quite radically a lot of these plants because they were up to the height of the canes. So I've cut them back, I've burned the leaves, and I'm kind of hoping that they're not going to get blight, but you know, if they do, they do. And then around here I have my sweet pea tunnel, and we are just beginning to get sweet peas. Sweet peas were the plant that I started off growing when I was a flower farmer, and Scotland is brilliant for a really long season of sweet peas. Used to be where lots of the sweet peas were grown. And then they would be sent to London on the train from Waverley, Edinburgh. There is a great account of the guard's van just smelling like sweet peas. I have some more sweet peas up on a trellis, and then this is my coreopsis here. This is the coreopsis. This is called American Dream. Now, again, if you look at American sites, where coreopsis is, of course, a native, they can't keep up with the picking of the flowers, but hey-ho. It's a wonderful print plant. I'm expecting these to flower in August or September, so another 2 or 3 months. And as it doesn't flower past the frost, I'm not sure it's going to be a fantastic plant for me. And around here you can see that Sweet William, these are all just self-seed plants, really loves this. And I don't know what to do with Sweet William, but yeah. And then we actually get to some deliberately planted plants which are really useful. So this is Dyer's chamomile, and my main aim here is to keep on top of the picking. So if you see plants like this, I will be pressing them, because they are fantastic for eco-printing. So I just want the heads to be nice and sunshiny and things. Where the heads come like this, with the droopy petals, they will be dried, and I'm going to be selling decent big size bags actually of Dyer's chamomile for dyeing wool, and that is, or thread, or whatever you want to dye with it, but it's a brilliant dye plant. And what I like about this is that it likes our climate, and it will probably keep flowering like this, if last year was anything to go by. As long as I keep on top of the deadheading stroke harvesting, it will probably keep flowering until the end of September. And then on the other side, I've got some more Dyer's chamomile, and very excitingly, these 3 weld plants. Weld does not like it here. We've got really heavy soil, so they are in a bed of much lighter sun. And I'm hoping to be able to get them to establish and to self-seed and to become a kind of a part of the garden. So I'm very, very excited about those wild plants. And here in the bed next to me, we have some black hollyhocks, again, grown from seed. They won't flower this year, but hopefully next year they will be pretty amazing. So that was where I had got to. I'd started to plant up this space as really a dye garden, maybe something that I can harvest plants and dry them and sell them like that. But then when I was doing the cyanotypes from last month and then this, I realised that actually there are lots of cottage garden plants or wild plants that give the most amazing results, but that it's very, very difficult to get. If you wanted to go and just buy 5 Astrantia, for example, to make something that you're cyanotyping or monoprinting, then you can't find them. And here I am with a really lovely clump of Astrantia, which I will be harvesting and I will be pressing, which is, to be honest, really, really hard work. It's very labour intensive. But also to be sending all of that beauty out into the world. I think it's an opportunity. Nobody else is doing it. She says, nobody else is preserving plants from garden plants, new garden plants, just for craft projects. So I hope that you enjoyed that tour of the garden. I am sorry about the wind noise. I did have a windsock on my microphone, but there's still a lot of wind there. And even here, I'm aware that the way that the wind's blowing today, you can actually hear road noise, which is quite far away. So I'm now going to go and empty this flower press and fill it back up again. And I hope that you have a fantastic week, and I will see you next Friday. Bye bye.